You might not think it would be that great big of a deal to order from Amazon and get a package. But the cruising life sometimes has some twists. Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. I'm talking about our recent adventure to go pick up an Amazon package that was, yes, being delivered in U.S. territory. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Sailrite, the one-stop shop for all your DIY canvas and upholstery projects. From heavy-duty portable sewing machines to fabric, foam, and everything in between, Sailrite's outstanding customer support and free how-to videos empower you to sew for your boat, home, and more. Visit sailrite.com, that's SAILRITE.com, to get started on your DIY journey. Well, cruising is definitely all about DIY. And sometimes that extends to something that you might not think ought to take that long. And yes, I'm talking about picking up a package. One of the joys of the cruising lifestyle is that you are nomadic. You get to be in your own time and do your own thing and move from place to place. Well, when you're trying to get something shipped to you, that particular joy can become a little bit of a hurdle. And so the first hurdle for getting any kind of a package sent to you is a shipping address. Luckily, we had friends on a nearby boat that have contacts in St. Thomas, and they offered up that address as a place for us to get mail sent in. We didn't even ask them. They just offered it to us. That's one of the joys of the cruising life for sure. Then, yes, we're talking about USVI. We're still talking about Amazon. And yeah, we're still talking about Amazon Prime. But the next hurdle came the shipping time. We placed this order for a couple of electrical parts and some new sunscreen on December 28th, thinking that, okay, maybe it'll take a week to arrive. That would put it at, the 4th of January, something like that. Julian was supposed to be leaving on the 5th of January. We wanted to be back in the BVI as soon as we could be. And we just said, okay, a package arriving in Red Hook, which is on the east end of St. Thomas, on January 5th or 6th, that would be perfect. Optimal timing. Day after day went by. No update on the Amazon order. It just kept saying, order received. We'll tell you when it's shipped. Jeremy had 2 different contacts with Amazon support. And both times they said, nope, hasn't shipped yet. And the second time it was, maybe it should ship today. January 6th. Friday, the 6th of January. On January 7th, the status updated to show that it actually had shipped. And it said it'll be delivered on Friday, the 13th of January. It came faster than that. It got here on the 10th of January. But we had already moved on to St. John, getting a little bit further east. So we get a note saying on Tuesday, January 10th, that, yep, the order has arrived, that the package has been delivered. We're on the other side of St. John, and this is on St. Thomas. So we had a couple of options. We could easily have just taken the boat and gone from St. John back to St. Thomas to pick up the package. We've already had to redo some of that easting, and it's hard to go east against the eastern trades. We'd already had to do that twice, and we weren't really excited about having to do it a third time. So the other option was to go on an adventure. Go on a planes, trains, and automobiles kind of adventure, where you're taking the dinghy, and a bus, and a ferry, and maybe another bus, and a lot of walking to pick up the package. So we did. We decided, yep, it's time to go on a road adventure, a land adventure. Here we go. I don't think we quite realized when we left in the morning how long it was going to take, but we knew we were up for an adventure. So the first thing we needed to do was to take the dinghy. We were anchored a couple miles away from Coral Bay. Coral Bay is a small little town with a waterfront road that happens to be on the bus route to Cruz Bay, and the ferries that go over to Red Hook and St. Thomas leave from Cruz Bay. Well, a couple miles in a dinghy, that's a 2.5 horsepower dinghy, is not a short endeavor. It took us about 30 minutes, but luckily it was pretty flat water. One of the things we're a little surprised by is that there is actually no dinghy dock in Coral Bay. What you do is you tie the dinghy to a submerged chain that goes from a waterfront tree out to an anchor point about 20 feet offshore. So if you go to Coral Bay, be prepared to get wet when getting out of the dinghy. Step one was the dinghy. We're at half an hour now. We hopped on the bus, and we had looked up what the schedule was. There's a link to that schedule in the show notes if you're interested. And the bus was actually pretty much right on time. It was $1 each for us, and you stuffed it into the cash box, said good morning to whoever was on the bus, and the ride to Cruz Bay commenced. It's about a 10-mile, maybe 11-mile ride, 45 minutes long. The bus went up to the ridgeline, across the island, back down, tucking into a couple of different places like the medical center and a little neighborhood or two. The road's barely wide enough for 2 cars. Most of the cars that we saw coming the other direction from us were Jeeps. Totally easy to understand why. And there are hairpin turns on steep inclines and a couple places where you almost had to stop to let the other person come around the corner because you needed to go a little bit wide to be able to make it around the corner. It was that hairpin of a turn. And we had incredible views sometimes, tantalizingly incredible views of the water, sometimes on the side with St. Thomas and sometimes on the BVI side. So we're now at an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 by the time all is said and done, not including much waiting time. We're still not on the island where our package is. We get to the ferry terminal and buy our tickets, $8.15 each way for each of us. If you lived on the island, it's about $6. It is $6 if you live on the island. And we chose to sit on the roof, looking out over the water and giving us a vantage point that we would not have had from water level. 10-minute ferry ride at the most. We got on the ferry and had to wait a little bit, of course, for it to leave. And then once we got off the ferry in Red Hook, we needed to walk. One of the things we hadn't quite anticipated, because we figured we'd be back in St. Thomas, we'd have cell phone coverage, no problem. We hadn't quite anticipated that we would have 0 cell coverage, so 0 data service. It's a little tough to look up an address on Google Maps when you can't actually access Google, but luckily Jeremy found an open hotspot. We found the package. We unloaded the various parts into the backpacks that we carried, one of them being a great dry bag, dumped the trash so we didn't have to carry it with us, and then set off for the second part of our errands. We brought our SodaStream CO2 canister to get refilled, which is something that you can do at Caribbean Inflatables. And that was about a 25-minute walk away if you stay on the main road, if you take your life in your hands because there are no sidewalks on the main road past a certain point. We walked to where the sidewalk ended, hung out for a while with a woman while she was waiting for a safari, which is an open-air public bus that costs $1. And a lot of these safaris went zipping by, filled to the brim with what we expect were probably cruise ship passengers, because we'd heard from people that it's way more lucrative for the safari buses to take a pile of cruise ship passengers on an island tour, maybe $10, maybe $20 a person, who knows, as opposed to picking up random people at $1 a ride. So after about 15 minutes of waiting, we said, nope. Jeremy found a back road route, and off we set. And the back road route is a little longer than that 25-minute walk. Luckily, we managed to hitch a ride that knocked about 25 minutes off the walk. And we got to Caribbean Inflatables, very happy to have air conditioning. Here's the next rub. CO2 canisters need to spend some time in a freezer before they can be filled. This is not that big of a deal if you plan ahead, which we hadn't done, and you're running errands in a car, which we weren't doing, and can drop off and pick up your container. Well, when you're walking and the town that you're walking from is a good 45 minutes away and you're going to leave the next day, and they had no idea when the person who could fill the tank was even going to be back at Caribbean Inflatables, we actually decided after all that walking that we were going to take our container back with us and refilling it in St. Martin, which maybe we'll call first this time, and maybe we won't try to do it on the very last day of us being in St. Martin. All of that, we had to do all the way again to get back to the boat. We needed to walk. We needed to take the ferry. We needed to take the bus. We needed to take the dinghy. It was a very full day. Lots and lots of modes of transport, lots of steps, But the main purpose of the whole trip was getting the package. And yes, that was indeed accomplished. I can't wait to share an Anchorage with you when we can laugh about these small things that sometimes take a whole lot longer than they would if we were living on land. And then we can toast to our good fortune at being able to take the time to do that in the first place. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends. We love it when you don't forget to subscribe in your favorite podcast app. Have the most spectacular week.